Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Zeus Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm here in person at VeeamON 2023. And I'm here with Jason Buffington, and you're the VP of Research at this company, right?
Yeah, I'm the Vice President of Market Strategy.
Yeah.
I work in the Office of CTO, and I lead most of our research projects.
Yeah, you do a lot of research at Veeam, I notice. There's always some report coming up from you guys.
We do.
Yeah.
So I helm most of our unbiased research, partnered with Dave Russell, who I know you've already talked with,
Yeah.
Julie Webb, you talked with quite a bit. But we do a lot of independent research. So we use third-party research firms. They go and ask questions on our behalf. These are not Veeam customers. They're not, we don't know who they are. We just provide some demographics of what we're looking for, and it's to help us figure out what to build and how to bring it to market.
Well, I know you have an analyst background, so it seems it's a good fit for you. So we're going to talk ransomware here.
Yes.
And it's a good topic because it seems like I saw you read your ransomware report last year.
Yep.
Seems like everyone's getting hit with ransomware now. So first of all, just go through, you are, as Danny likes to say, you're unapologetically a backup and recovery company.
We are.
But yet you're doing a ransomware report. So what's the tie-in there, and describe to me the methodology for the research.
Yeah, well, the tie-in is, what if we're a backup company, which we are, what do we need to build for the best option for recovery? And the scenario that most folks want to recover from
Is ransomware.
is ransomware.
Yeah.
And so really the research was to understand how bad are the attacks, how do they get in, how are the teams aligned, what are the tech they were using, what's the tech they're using now. So all the things that we need to know, so we basically build a better mousetrap to meet or exceed those needs.
So it provides some data, but also helps you with your product roadmap.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why actually all of our research is a combined effort between the marketing organization and the Office of CTO, so we know not only go to market, but we also know what to build next. This particular research was fun because it's our second year doing it, and in both cases what we asked for was organizations that got hit at least once in the last 12 months. In this case, we had 1,200 organizations.
Wow.
Across
that alone is shocking, right?
Yeah, a lot of research doesn't get into 1,200.
Yeah.
Our big report actually is 4,200.
Yeah.
4,000 responses. But this one was 1,200, all of which got hit at least once.
Within the last year.
Within the last year.
Okay.
And the other thing about it is we specifically looked at 4 different personas. CISO, so the exec in charge. Security professionals, right? They're doing prevention. The backup admins, they're doing remediation, and IT ops, they're the ones who get the call, right? So looking at all 4 of the personas, and are they aligned? Are they doing the same things? What are they doing different? That was a big part of the design.
What about the ex-CISOs because they didn't have ransomware covered? No, so,
what a ransomware event is what we call a resume generating opportunity.
Yes, yeah. All right, so 1,200 respondents, was it about the same size as last year?
Last year was 1,000.
Okay, and what percent of the survey is the same as last year?
So about 75 to 80% of the questions are identical, and we wanted that so we could get year over year.
For trending, sure.
Right, so for example, you said earlier everyone's getting hit by ransomware. Well, in our big report last year, we said 76% of organizations got hit at least once. This year, 85% of organizations got hit at least once.
Yeah.
Right, so arguably, the industry is losing the battle, right? So more organizations got hit. In fact, last year, more organizations got hit quarterly than didn't get hit at all.
Wow.
I mean, think about that for a second. Instead of being able to say, hey, we didn't get hit, or we don't think we did, imagine being in a C-level room and saying, well, let's talk about our quarterly cyber event results as part of the board level meeting, right? More people got hit quarterly than not at all. That's crazy.
That's why I'm not in corporate IT anymore. So, yeah, right.
Amen.
Yeah. So now let's get into the report itself.
Yeah.
What were some of the interesting findings from it?
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was you always follow the money, right? So how did they pay? Did they pay? Interestingly enough, only about 40% of organizations had a policy to pay, and yet 80% of victims paid.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, think about that. First of all, 40% actually have a policy to pay.
Yes.
Right. That alone is shocking. Right?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, and look, the bad actors are looking for opportunity, right? And they know, hey, for a lot of organizations, as long as we make it okay, they'll just pay and maybe they'll get their money back. Here's one of the downsides. 1 in 4 organizations that paid the ransom still could not recover.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I mean, can you imagine, you send off this Bitcoin, right? Well, now, Hollywood would tell you there's a magic wand. You wave the wand and poof, now you're back in business. That's not how that works, right?
No, Hollywood gets the teenage hacker in.
Yeah.
They do stuff, but absolutely it doesn't
okay,
work.
we're back online.
Yeah.
No,
in fact, I think in the
works.
companies I've interviewed, more companies haven't got their data back than actually have. So,
You're talking more pessimist than I am.
Yeah.
So 1 in 4 paid but didn't get it back. The thing I like though is 1 in 6. So 16% of organizations, only 16, said we recovered instead of paying. Right? You know, if we were to say what is Veeam's mission statement, right? In one phrase, it should be to help the other 84% of organizations say we recovered instead of paying. I mean, that's the whole point of what we do.
Yeah, and all right, so that's a pretty interesting stat just in itself. What were some of the key findings here? Anything surprising?
So a couple of things that were surprising. So because we're tracking the money, one of the new areas we asked about this year was around cyber insurance. And while many organizations have some kind of insurance that does include IT services, there's actually a growing percentage where ransomware events are specifically excluded from coverage, right? Also, I think it was only 8% of respondents said their cyber insurance did not change year over year. For everybody else, deductibles went up, coverage went down, premiums went up, right? So again, it's kind of like, I live in Dallas, Texas. Right, I can get flood insurance. If I lived in Houston, Texas, I could not get flood insurance because it's more likely. And the insurance carriers are taking that kind of approach when it comes to indemnifying organizations for cyber. So that was a big area. One of the areas that I had hoped we'd make improvement on is we tested questions around, do the cyber teams and the backup teams, do they feel like they're aligned with each other? And you'd think in 2023, with all the hype, they'd be having weekly meetings.
Yeah.
And that is not happening. More than half, 60% of organizations said that those two teams need either a significant overhaul or a complete reboot between how they work with each other.
Was there any change in that large organization, mid-size? Because I've been talking about security convergence with networking and DevOps and things, and it seems like in the mid-size organizations there is some evidence of that. Once you get to the large organizations, though, that have these silos, that completely goes away. Yeah.
So we tested for that, and one of the things that we saw was in mid-sized organization, many of them are wearing the same hat. Right? And so, my left hand knows what my right hand is doing, but as the organization got bigger, here's the other side of where that got ugly. When you compare that sentiment across the 4 personas, the personas closest to the problem, meaning security professionals and backup admins, they were least satisfied with how well the teams were working. IT ops and the execs, they're happily naive to how dysfunctional those teams are.
Because they have the dotted lines up maybe, and they think everything's okay.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting too. Now, is there, in the report, was there anything that changed from last year?
One of the big shifts that we saw was we wanted to look at where are you going to recover to when ransom strikes. So we talk about how ransomware is a disaster. Of course, it's not the only disaster, right? So when you think about things like fire or flood, the servers that are crispy or the servers that are drippy, we fail those over, where are you going to fail those to? You should have that same approach with ransomware. And so we asked that question. There was actually a 13% shift. So last year is about 65% of orgs said they were going to use on-premise metal. Only about 13% said they were going to go with cloud infrastructure. 13% shift. So now just less than half of orgs still think they're going to use metal. Over a quarter of organizations now plan on using cloud infrastructure. So that 1 year shift just shows how viable cloud is as part of the DR strategy.
And do you guys does Veeam have a opinion, preference, one of the, I'm sure you'd want it in the cloud, but both work, right?
Yeah, both work. Yeah. So especially
cloud to me would be a little more agile, I suppose.
It would. Now, in fact, one of the things that we actually tested, and thing I'm really happy with, when you have 1,200 on the end, not only do you get to compare against the personas, we also compare it against geographies. And actually, like LATAM was much more likely to have a hybrid BCDR strategy where they could fail over on-prem or cloud, whichever they wanted. If you look more in North America, they were much more presumptive they were going to have physical metal to go with. APJ was more presumptive they were going to be able to use cloud.
Well, that's interesting, because APJ I always think of as really late adopters to cloud. Yeah.
Right, but also APJ, a lot of them are really big on consulting and outsourcing, and so
That's
it's
true.
just going to magically fail over wherever they want it to. But I love the fact that we did get some bifurcation across there. I also like the fact that most organizations, the average, did have a hybrid strategy. So if the metal is still there, or they could get new metal, use the metal. If it's not there, use your favorite cloud. And again, Veeam doesn't care. We have, we can recover to another set of VMware. We can recover to Azure, whatever you want.
Yeah. So now that we understand there is a problem,
Yep.
right, and it's certainly doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon.
Nope.
How do companies protect themselves against that?
So the last section of the report all looked at what were the technologies that you're using now that you may not have been using actually at the time of the crisis. And the two biggest technologies that we saw were around significant uptick in the use of immutability, right? And I like the fact that we saw the most common immutable repository was in the cloud, but there was good representation for immutable storage on-prem. There was good representation of using tape as an air gap medium. And in fact, the average organization was using just less than 2 of the 3. And that really should be a best practice, right? So your disk should be immutable. And then if you're going to a cloud, the cloud should be immutable. And if you have your long-term data, that should be on air gap tape, right? You should have that immutability throughout the entire life cycle. Veeam does that. Others do also, but that is a one key learning. The other one that was really interesting is the question of how do you ensure that you don't reinfect the environment as part of the recovery process? 44% of respondents now use what they call as a sandboxing or a staged restore, where they're actually restoring into a clean room, running some kind of detection technology against it again, and then if it passes, then automating the restoration back into production so you're not reintroducing infection.
So you're not restoring bad data.
Here's the problem. If 44% are using staging, that means 56% are risking reinfection. Another thing that we need to be solving for.
And how often does that happen?
How does what happen?
The reinfection.
We didn't actually test for that. What I can tell you is the average organization that in the survey got hit 2.3 times per year.
Okay.
And so you should assume that for many of them, it's because they didn't solve or block all the things that got them in the first time.
Yeah, or they're really unlucky.
Or they're really unlucky.
But I think the first, if you believe in Occam's razor, right?
Yes.
It's most likely that they were reinfected then.
Yep.
So now I know from a protection mechanism, the industry uses this 3-2-1 best practice where it's 3 backups, 2 media types, 1 offsite, I believe, right? But Veeam has extended that to 3-2-1-1-0. So can you describe what the difference is in your approach?
Sure. By the way, the irony of 3-2-1-1-0 is it's actually a zip code in Florida that gets hit by a hurricane about every 2.5 years. So it is the epitome of a disaster-based zip code. Yeah, so the other one is to have a copy that's offline. And then the 0 is verification, which actually kind of goes back to one of the data points from the research. Because one of the things that we actually looked at was, do you have a pre-designated team, and what does their playbook look like? And the 2 most common things in an incident response playbook, one is that you have clean backups, which is the verify, and one of them is that they are survivable, right? So that you actually have that survivability of data so that you can recover. Because if you don't have a survivable copy, your only other option is to pay the ransom.
All right, Jason. Well, thanks for that. But again, one last question for you. We're at VeeamON here. What are you hoping to see here this year?
Well, we've been working on the ransomware data for the last 6 months, and the data got done in January timeframe, or February. So I'm looking forward to seeing it debut from main stage. We're also sharing the results of our last 2 research reports: the data protection report, which is our macro report, 4,000 plus respondents; the cloud protection trends, which was IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS. So we're unlocking a lot of data and really just hoping to make it more actionable for everyone who came in person or who's viewing online.
Yeah, and I imagine for the audience here, it helps them even justify the investments in Veeam, right? So that's an important thing too.
So hopefully for all the backup admins, security professionals that are here, we're giving them data to walk up to their execs and say, this is what we need. It's all unbiased. It's there to start conversations. Okay,
well, I'll include a link to the report in the YouTube description, but I assume it's on the Veeam.com homepage.
Yes.
So anyways, on behalf of Jason Buffington, I'm ZKast. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on another ZKast.